Good evening to everyone. Today we have the class on that's the unit 3, especially the animal nutrition. Then the chapter 2 in it is the proximate principles analysis. Proximate principles, everyone know. And this is just a recall of your BVSC memory in which you have learned all these things, but in little records get the very crisp manner in which the exam is going to be appear. So, welcome to all once again, and we will start our proceedings of today's. Then, the first of all, what's a proximate principle, etc. Then, the proximate principles of the feed are the one which are used for measuring the quality of a feed, means content of a feed using different parameters. Maybe the a carbohydrate, protein, then acid soluble ash, and many more parameters need to be tested in this particular chapter is concerned. Then the proximate principles or proximate analysis is also called as Windy system of feed analysis. That is the very common terminology that's used, and we're also going to use the same type of the terminologies here. So, how it is originated is the original concept of this is from Windy Experiment Station, Germany in 1865, and it has been started by Wilhelm Henberg and Friedrich Stockmann. So these two scientists they started the proximate analysis by windy system. Hence, it is conducted in the windy experimental station in Germany in 1865. It is called as the windy system of feed analysis, or also the proximate principle of the feed analysis. So here, the windy experiment is chemical analysis of the food and food on fodder. Both the nutritional quality of this one is considered as the food and fodder, especially from this region. So coming to the next thing, here you can see that various points are there. There's the chemical composition of feedstuffs on percent diameter basis. Always it is expressed in terms of the percent dry matter basis. How much dry matter is present or a component is related to how much quantity of the dry matter. That's how it is based. So all these things we'll see what is crude protein, EE, NFP, then CF, etc. So the dry matter different, for example, Jover Kabdi, the dry matter 90.23, then the soybean straw, it is about the 86.72, 27 point hybrid napier, a green grass. So the dry matter content is less. So the concentrates, for example, sugar, dry ration, etc., the different crude protein and NFE, EE, crude fiber, or total ash, they vary to the greater extent. We will come into the later how all these things are being calculated. So this is the way how the chemical composition of a food is being calculated. Then feed analysis method, that's the Windies method, is initiated with a feed sample, given feed sample. Then first of all, it is estimated for the quantity of the moisture, how much quantity of the moisture is present in that given dry matter. Then it is dried in oven at 100 degree centigrade. Then dry matter or moisture free sample will be prepared. Whenever you heat a feed sample to the extent of 100 degrees centigrade, especially in an oven, then what happens is almost all the moisture content becomes dry. Then it is digested in the Zaldal's digestion, then distillation unit is there. Then we will find the crude protein. That is the method of analysis of proximate principle. Then, if the dry matter after drying the moisture is subjected to the succinylate extraction with petroleum ether, then the ether extract is available or fat free sample because the petroleum ether is going to dissolve all the fat in the given sample, then it becomes the fat free sample. Then acid alkali digestion, the fat free sample is subjected to acid and alkali digestion, then the crude fiber or total ash will be determined. So this is the flow chart in a simple thing. Feed sample. First of all, the moisture content will be analyzed by after drying this thing. Before and after, the sample is weighed for the dry matter content. Hence, later this the difference between the dry matter then with the wet feed, then that if you deduct it, then it becomes the moisture content. Then it is subjected to the Zerdal's digestion and distillation, then crude protein will be obtained. Later, the same feed sample, dried feed sample, it is extracted with petroleum ether with succinate of potash as usual. Then we will get the ether extract. Then fat-free sample will be available to us. Then it will be subjected to acid and alkali digestion. Ultimately, the total ash and crude fiber are the only materials that will be remaining. So this is the one, and this can be done to all the feed samples, especially the Jover Kadbi, then green Napier, soybean straw, or any concentrate which is a feed stuff which is intended for the cattle consumption. Hence, we need to do the analysis of all the samples and later we can conduct or justify what are all the contents of the individual samples. So this is the fiber estimation assemblies there. After the dry matter is subjected to the oxalate apparatus, then it is subjected to the fiber estimation assembly. Just you can go here. This is the fiber as crude fiber as estimation assembly because initially we are going to obtain the petroleum ether succinate extraction, then fat free sample, then acid or alkali it will be subjected. Then in this particular equipment fiber estimation or the digestion will be done. Ultimately we will get the crude fiber and also the acid insoluble protein. So these are all some of the things. Then contents, especially what are all the contents of a feed are number one, water or the moisture content is there, number one. Number two, it is the CP or crude protein. The third one is ether extract. Then fourth one is the CF or crude fiber. Then fifth one is the ash or it's also called as acid insoluble ash. Then the last one is nitrogen free extractives or they are also called as the NFES, nitrogen free, especially they are called as the nitrogen free extracts or the NFEs. Then the windy system of the analysis, especially this deals with the feed or biological sample whenever it is obtained need to be estimated for both dry matter content and also the moisture. So grossly what we can estimate is number one the dry matter, then the two is also the organic matter. So all these both will be seen. One is dry matter, moisture, then organic matter, inorganic matter, then acid insoluble ash and acid soluble ash, or the inorganic matter is divided into crude protein, ether extract, carbohydrates, or this is nitrogen free extract and crude fiber. So once again to go with this particular thing is, here we can see that uh, first of all the feed by sample whenever it is subjected, then it is always uh, estimated for two things. One is the dry matter, then moisture. The dry matter is further subjected to so many things, procedures, inorganic matter and organic matter. Inorganic and inorganic matter both are subjected to the acid insoluble, soluble acid, acid soluble acid. So then inorganic matter is subjected once again to the crude protein, ether extract, then carbohydrates or NFEs and CF. NFEs means nitrogen free extract and the crude protein. So these are all the components. So water or moisture is one of the important principles that is very much required in the field. But it should not exceed certain quantities, because what happens is it causes the fungi to grow and secrete some mycotoxins, including the aflatoxins, acrotoxins, zearalenons, then T2, T3 toxins, depending upon the type of the fungi that is growing on the field sample. So the dry matter percent is equal to one formalized conductor, that is weight after drying, then divided by weight before drying into 100, that is the dry matter percent will be seen, or the percent moisture is equal to then 100 minus dry matter percent. So both of them are the same. Suppose if we weigh a 100-gram feed and dry it, and after drying it, if it is 80 grams, then 25% is the content of the moisture. So this is the same. Weight after drying, it will be less 80 or divided by 100 into 100. So the then 100 minus dry matter percent is always percent moisture is calculated in a similar pattern. Then the water, especially this is the moisture content and dry matter are key, especially persons, especially key determining factors in the field sample is concerned. Then feed with over 14% moisture risk mold formation. So there is a chance that these are forming the mold or a fungus is concerned. Then what happens if a fungus is grown means it is going to secrete lot of mycotoxins. Then feed becomes very unpalatable and also toxic. Then this affects the storage value of a feed is concerned. Then hence we need to check the water percent. So it should be below that of the 14%. Then the cost of the nutrition considers moisture content, and silage requires forage moisture near about the 70% moisture will be present. So the moisture content, if it is more, then we need to pay for the water in the rate of the feed. Hence high moisture should always be limit the nutrient intake of the animal. Then feeding standards usually omit water needs which require some corrections, especially the correction. And moisture is measured by weight loss in oven drying. After we are going to keep the food stuff in the oven, then dry it and later calculate. But this process can also lead to loss of some volatile fatty acids, VFAs, especially the cattle nutrient, and decomposed sugars or any moisture or the volatile content or inflating moisture values. All these things will be seen for us. Hence, one need to calculate all these things then before the moisture is properly taken into care. Then, what is the significance of the moisture is it determines the keeping quality of the hay. A or maybe a concentrate feed and determines the losses in silage making. So the silage also contains very high quantity of the moisture to the extent of sometimes 70%. Then classification of the feed into succulent feed and non-succulent depending upon the water content. If the water content is less, it can be called as non-succulent feed. If it is more, then we can say it is as the what you call as the succulent fodder. Then, depending upon the significance of the storage of the feed, then it also makes how much time we can store a feed. If the moisture content is high, the fodder cannot be stored for more time. So while purchasing the feed also, if you are purchasing the feed on the basis of the weight, then there will be a loss to everyone and directly related to nutrition value of the feed is always it is indicated. Then what happens is some volatile substances are also evaporated along with moisture. So that's the drawback of calculation of the moisture. But sometimes overestimation of moisture content on silage due to the evaporation of the VFAs. Volatile fatty acids are the very important nutrient contents, especially in case of the ruminants. So if they are lost, the feed quality or nutrient quality will also be affected. Then the calculation of the moisture is highly variable, especially in young plants it is about 80% and only 20% is the dry matter. But in case of the old plants it is less. Then, if more quantity of the water is present, it is very difficult to store that feed for longer time as it is easily affected by the fungal growth. The next one is the water, then crude protein. So protein is one of the important nutrient requirement of the animal feed because the proteins are the one which are very much required for the production and reproduction. Sometimes the meat is also made up of protein and if a feed material with good proteinaceous value then the muscle mass will be developed properly. So the principle of estimation of this crude protein is in the presence of sulfuric acid, what are all the requirement is sulfuric acid, sodium sulfate, sodium sulfate and a catalyst amino nitrogen of many organic materials are converted into ammonium sulfate. So ammonium sulfate. So what happens? Amino nitrogen which is present in the feed may be converted to the organic matters into ammonium sulfate. Then ammonia is distilled. Ammonia is distilled from the alkaline medium especially then absorbed into standardized mineral acid, any mineral acid. So this is the way how the crude protein is calculated. So the thing is, the requirement of the crude protein is always very high in case of the cattle, etc. Then so the amino acids or the proteins or the polypeptide chains are the building blocks of the proteins. And more crude protein, the quality of the feed always increases. So what's a crude protein means? The protein content helps to classify the feed, especially most of the feed in Indian cities, in the, as per the BIS standards, etc. They are calculated or classified depending upon the crude protein content. So it is estimated by multiplying the nitrogen content by 6.25. So this is the parameter, assuming that the feed contains 16% nitrogen. So this is a formula. Then this provides the total protein without considering the quality, and it doesn't separate true protein from non-proteinous nitrogen sources. Like sometimes the non-proteinous nitrogen like urea or uric acid are mixed with the compound feed, and this drastically reduces the requirement of the protein or the crude protein, which is directly to be added in the form of the cake, which are very costly in nature. So when analyzing fecal nitrogen, the conversion factor may not apply to nitrogen from the metabolic source. So these points we need to understand while we are calculating the CP or crude protein. Then crude, both of these true protein and the non-protein nitrogen is summing above the crude protein. Then this is estimated by using Johann Zeldal method or Zohan. It's one of the most popular technique developed very old, even then still also it's holding good. Then the assumption here is all protein is present as nitrogen only, and all food protein contains 16% of nitrogen. That is the standard estimation, and because 100 divided by 16 is equal to 6.25. So crude protein is equal to n into 6.25, whereas n is equal to nitrogen content of a given feed. So here the protein is assumed to be the present of the nitrogen only. Then a formula n into 6.25 is done, and it is giving us the value of the crude protein. So what are all the merits and demerits of this method is protein estimation is of the cheap method. So the analytical equipments do not cost much when compared to the other equipments. Then of course it is accurate when compared to the other type of the estimations. Then protein estimation um, is always done using the concentrated H2SO4, but sometimes if you are trying to digest a feed in concentrated H2SO4, there is always a damage or danger is always present, especially in case of the person who are working in the laboratory. And hence one need to take care of such hazardous materials risk in the laboratory is concerned. Then ether extract is another name. We have seen that ether extract is done to get the fat content in a feed is determined by extracting the feed in succinate apparatus for 16 to 8 to 16 hours, especially in case of the succinylate apparatus. So succinylate apparatus is one of the oldest equipment, and till day, uh, many nutritional labs they do contain this as one of the old equipment. But it contains both true fats and pseudo fats, hence called as the crude fat. So crude fat, pseudo fat includes the wax, which is present in a foodstuff, then cholesterol, lecithin, then volatile oils. All these are the pseudo fats. Please remember such terminologies like wax, cholesterol, lecithin, and volatile. So these are the common ingredients of the food, and we need to calculate the ether extract. So the principle of conducting this test is the sample should be taken, a known quantity of the sample should be taken as per the manufacturer's this the recommendations. Then later it should be extracted with diethyl ether, which dissolves most of the fats, then some oils, and the pigments which are present in a plant material or a feed material. It is going to totally dissolve it, and the other fat soluble substances are also dissolved in ether extract. Then merits of this test are instruments used are the cheaper. Simply, you can use the cheap equipment as these are standardized in a good old days. So hence the manufacturing costs and craze has also gone. So the ether, what we are going to use here to solve the fat, etc., can be recycled once again back. But the demerit of this thing is the components like wax, then sometimes the cholesterol, lecithin are also soluble, resulting in the overestimation of the fat. So the wax is not having any nutritional property, and also the cholesterol and lecithin. But sometimes these values will also be added to the ether extract, especially using a feed analysis techniques. So the next one is the total ash. So ash is totally not useful to the animal, and it should be with a minimal limit. So when a sample is burnt in muffle furnace, everyone knows the muffle furnace, about 600 degrees Celsius for 2 hours continuously, only mineral matter is left, or else everything is incinerated. So this is the total ash or mineral content of the feed. So most of the metals they will stay in the ether extract or the total ash. Then the demerits of this test is there is no indication of amounts of individual minerals. It's a collective term, and totally it can also be called as the mineral quantity. Whereas long time is required for the digestion, about 12 to 24 hours continuous electricity supply should be there, water supply should be there, and many more requirements are there. So whereas the muffle furnaces, which can be heated to the extent of 800 degree Celsius, etc., then it may destroy the regular content of the feed also, which is very much required to the cattle, like the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So the loss of volatile minerals is also another disadvantage. For example, the copper is lost while we are going to calculate the total ash content, whereas the Fe or the iron, Pb means lead, Hg mercury, then nickel, then zinc. All this will be lost in that very high temperature. very high temperature, because in the muffle furnace you might have seen that we cannot keep more than 100 to 200 gram or sometimes maximum 1 kg of the sample. So this is the costly technique. Then let us see what are all the recent developments in this estimation of total ash in a particular feed or feed ingredients. Then the merits of calculation of the ash are instruments what we use here are very cheaper, simple or the simple material. Then the demerits are apart from fats, components like wax, chlor, cholesterol, then lecithin are also soluble, resulting in the overestimation of the fat content, especially. So the cholesterol, sometimes the cholesterol is required, but sometimes not. Then total ash is some similar to that of the acid insoluble ash, but the sample is burnt in muffle furnace for about 2 hours. Only mineral matter is left behind. So this is called as the total ash of mineral content of the feed. So if we check this formula, like the ash after ashing and the sample weight into 100, so that will give the percent of the ash, because after calculating the quantity of the ash to a said feed, then weight after ashing into 100 gives the percent ash. But there are certain demerits are also there. No indication of amounts of individual minerals. We cannot estimate because it's not a qualitative test, not a quantitative test, it's just a qualitative test. And long time is required, about 12 to 24 hours, depending upon the type of the food material is concerned. Muffle furnaces are quite costly, so we need to handle them very usually, then also with lot of care. Then ash composition in mineral or marine origin is relatively, it's a constant phenomenon, but it helps us to calculate the phosphorus, carbohydrates, NFEs, and the total organic matter. Organic matter and inorganic matter are two separate entities. We will see what are all these present, especially in the animal's body. So the ash estimation method does not differentiate between the mineral and the concentrates like sand or sand silica. So we need to see the content of the minerals, then volatile minerals, then iodine, then also the selenium are lost during the ashing process. So the muffle varnish also uses lot of energy to develop the tremendous quantity of the energy, and everything is incinerated, means burnt out. We cannot find even small traces also. So these are all the modern technologies developed. So at what temperature it is done is the 550 to 600 degree Celsius or the centigrade. Then despite of the limitations of the crude protein estimation, especially the crude protein estimated everywhere, so that we should not lose it. In the dung sample also, the protein content is very much required for the aquatic creatures also. Then the seashore, we have got very beautiful spots. That's also there. The different methods are there for estimating. So many methods are there. As on date, the modern methods are being evaluated by the scientists, and you can see that different methods are being circulated, etc. So acid insoluble ash is another entity in which what we can say is when hydrochloric acid is added to the ash already which is produced, then what happens is some substance remain insoluble in that hydrochloric acid also. That they are called as the acid insoluble ash or AIA. So this indicates content of silica, or it's also called as sand silica content, and that's due to the faulty handling, or sometimes the mud, etc. They are also present. So the acid insoluble ash is not at all useful to the cattle or any animals because they do not contribute anything, and the this need to be estimated to know the quality of the feed. More and more quality of the acid insoluble ash, then lesser and lesser quality of the feed. Then acid soluble ash is another thing. Some materials are soluble, especially in the total ash, especially the soluble protein of the total ash is soluble ash, which contains all macro and micro molecules. So this is also estimated as part of the proximate principles. So here there is a flowchart how to estimate the fiber content in a particular compounded feed. So the fibers are estimated by using the Van Soist method. Here that method is there, then very commonly used main Van Soist method. So this method fibers are characterized into three components, whereas the neutral detergent fibers, then acid detergent fiber, then acid detergent lignin. So these three are need to be estimated in a feed sample to say that it is having some nutritional value. So, if whenever a feed sample is submitted to the laboratory, it is boiled in the neutral detergent at the neutral pH of 7. Then, after the feed is obtained, then it is subjected to different tests, and neutral detergent fiber or NDF. Then, for example, the plant cell wall, it is called as neutral detergent 1. For example, these also contain cellulose, hemicellulose, then lignin, sand silica, and some quantity of the proteins. So the second one is the this is the neutral detergent and also neutral detergent soluble. This is the soluble carbohydrates, starch, then organic one, then protein and NDS. So the neutral detergent fiber. Then this NDF is boiled with the detergent solution, any detergent solution. Then the remaining material is also subject to different estimations. So add detergent fiber or it is also called as ADF. These are cellulose, lignin, then silica. Cellulose, lignin, and the silica. This is the point where we are there. Whereas the acid detergent fibers are directly, they are treated with a 72% H2SO4 that in a particular method. Then the lignin and the mineral mixtures will be separated. Then, after some time, the cellulose is dissolved totally. Then, lignin and the principles at 550 degrees Celsius. What happens is it is going to form the feed in the ash and also lignin content. Ash and the lignin content are totally useless, what we can say, to a milk yielding cow. But in spite of that thing, some quantity of the fiber is very much required for the proper digestion. And we'll see what are those. Then the neutral detergent fiber, this procedure involves separation of dry matter into two factors. One of high digestibility. The high digestibility is a requirement of the thing. So, and other is the low digestibility. There are only two things. There are no terms called as the intermediate absorbability, etc. So once and for all, we need to get the neutral detergent fibers. Neutral detergent solution is equal to 3% of sodium lauryl sulfate, and many of you might have got this sodium lauryl sulfate during the COVID-19. These came as chemicals, with chemical disinfections, especially in case of the human beings. Then the next terminology is acid detergent fiber. So it is preparatory step for the purpose of determining the lignin in the given sample. So the principle is the remaining sample what we retain to be subjected for boiling, and not a big thing actually. A small quantity of the material which is intended for is taken, and there are several protocols which can estimate the lignin content. So the number one is boiling 1 gram of the feed in acid detergent solution for an hour. Then we need to filter it. So there are the terminologies are being added. Then EDF and the NDF. So different equipments are required for establishment of a nutritional analytical laboratory, and you might have got some knowledge, especially on such varieties of the different type of the equipment. Then acid detergent lignin. So this is totally a not utilizable source of the feed. Then in order to determine the amount of this lignin, acid detergent fiber is digested into the extent of 70%, then 3 hours have to be taken, then we need to especially dry the sample for the easy calculation of seed detergent lignin. When the loss is the weight is always during the action process. That's this is the lignin and effective. So the nitrogen-free extract is NFE. This represents the soluble carbohydrate of the feed. Then, such as the starch. Starch is also one of the important ingredient of the feed. Then, what we can say is the percent NFE is equal to then percent dry matter, then EE, then crude protein plus add percent and percent the crude fiber. So this is a formula how we can calculate this thing. So if you found one or two value, the remaining other things can automatically we can calculate. So what is the demerit of this one is NFE or nitrogen free extract is not determined analytically, but it is calculated by the difference especially. Then therefore this NFE nitrogen free extract accumulates all of the errors that exist in other proximate principles of the component. So this what the author says that this cannot be the correct thing to estimate nitrogen free extract in a ruminant. So here there is a chart that what happens, especially a feed sample is subjected to different proximate principal analysis in different temperature. So drying at 100 plus or minus 20 degrees Celsius. So the fraction that is going to out of the feed is the moisture content. Then the components that's dried or water or other compounds will be eliminated out of the feed, and you can take that particular feed and the selling can also be done. Whereas the ignite method it is 500 to 600 degrees Celsius procedure. It is above. Then only the ash fraction is there, and ash means mineral elements. Then Zeldal digestion, it is crude protein. The uh, protein, amino acids, and not non-proteinous nitrogenous matter will be related. Whereas the ether extract always the fat which is present in different parts of the food will be obtained. Then this is containing that of the cellulose and lignin, whereas the extra ether extracts do contain fats, oils, and waxes. Then ultimately, the remainder is NFE, whereas the components of these things are the starch or the sugar, or because they will be very strongly bound to each other, and it is difficult to estimate them individually. Then advantage of the PA is proximate analysis is the comparison of the fields on specific basis. So it is a common bias basis for the feed purchasing and for purchase of the ration formulations. So no substitute is till date except for the fiber component. Whereas it forms starting point of specific analysis used for analysis of the feeds, then the feces, then urine, then bloody tissues. Always it will be there, bloody tissues. So body tissues, then body fluids. Both are estimated by if a starting point, it's a starting point for specific type of analysis are already present, then these are used for the analysis of the feeds, feces, urine, which do contain very high content of the moisture of this thing, then urine, body tissues, then also this the body fluids, etc., can also be measured. But it has got lot of demerits. You see, the broad categorization of the carbohydrates it led, and the entire attention of the scientists came towards this particular demerits only. Then it does not include vitamins because many of the times the essential vitamins are part of our existing life, and we should not forget all those things. Whereas it does not include the vitamin. Then another thing is traditional conversion factor, 6.25% of the total feed is too large for most of the wild vegetation. Then values are approximate one and without actually using the particular digestible respectively the questionnaire. So the crude fiber method uh, severely underestimates the total plant cell wall content of the feed because it may escape or sometimes get digested itself. Then it is also having some demerits of including the desensitized, this especially the including the feedstuffs which are not useful for the animals. And another thing is the crude fiber, as the name indicates, it doesn't get accumulated for some of the hemicellulose and the lignin or many more contents are there. The residue of alkali plus acid digestion is not only indigestible portion of feed but is compound of cellulose and variable portions of the non-cellulose saccharide, polysaccharide, lignins, etc. So the digestibility of the carbohydrate does not follow the partitioning into CF and NFE. So lot of demerits are always there, whereas the NFE contains pentoses, then EE, ether extract contains large percent of plant waxes, especially the fat origin. But the crude protein does not give any specific indication about the damage that is caused to the feed material during the heat exposure. So the ash content is not true representative of the inorganic materials, the feed. So these are all the demerits. So the merits and demerits are always there, and to summarize all these things, proximate principles are divided into dry matter and moisture. So we need to dry it at 105 degrees centigrade, 16 hours. Then the Zeldal method is there. Then in the Zeldal method, we are going to find the crude protein is there. Whereas the ether extractant, then crude fat is available. Whereas the ash content is subjected to the incineration at 600 degrees Celsius. Then ash will be obtained. Then the fat-free residue will be remaining if properly the nutrition is not given. So the crude fibers will be retained and ultimately the ash once again acid insoluble ash and acid soluble ash will be calculated. Then, as we have discussed all these things, the water, crude protein, crude fat, crude fiber, or non proteinous nitrogens like the nitrogen free extract. So, these parameters we have studied. So, there are the contents are always discussed. The dry matter is equal to weight after drying, before drying, etc. Then 100 minus dry matter. So, all these we have discussed in a length. Then here the you can see these oxalate apparatuses here all are put in a heating mantle, etc. Then later it's going to be evaporated. Then ultimately we can get the digestible fibers and non-digestible fibers. So the amino acids are not in proper content. For example, you can see that alanine is 15%, arginine is 32, aspartate 10, and cysteine is also 11, whereas the glutamate 19, 9.52%. So all proteins are not created in a equal quantity. For example, the protein is content of so many matter. Number one is the casein 15.9%, then the glycine 17.5%, then hemoglobin it is about 16.8%. Then albumin is the percent nitrogen is 15.5%. So the serum it is about 16.2% of nitrogen it is contained. Then already we have discussed the disadvantage of the estimation of the crude fiber. So the crude fiber, the three important components are there in the crude fiber. Number one, cellulose, hemicellulose, and also the lignin. Lignin is not true carbohydrate, but it is having some structural similarity. So this is widely used to determine the fiber content of the feed, but it is has not come serious also, and it is not declared. So the crude fat, then nitrogen-free extract. We have already discussed about the demerit because of NFE is not determined analytically, but it is calculated by some of the assumption or there are a lot of differences maybe there. As the total ash content of a feed goes high and high, then the scientists consider it as the cheap source of the feed. But the measurement of total ash content, there is no indication of the amounts of individual minerals. Long time required, then muffle furnaces are quite costly to run, and loss of volatile minerals like the copper, Fe, then lead, mercury, and nickel and the zinc. Advantages, as usual, we have already studied. There is a it need sometimes whenever the feed need to be offered to a group of cows, then we need to calculate how much food protein is going to inside the rumen, then how much quantity is coming out, and after 2 or 3 days. That's what. Ultimately, we'll conclude like this: proximate analysis is a system for approximating the nutritive value of foodstuff without actually using it in the feed trial, etc. Whereas it is simple and yet it sometimes it is required, especially descriptive method for evaluating the nutritive value of feeds for comparison. The main demerits of this system are it is underestimating some contents like the proteins because it is calculated as 60% in a slab of the nitrogen. It is not exactly correct. So we need to rethink, especially on this particular aspect is concerned. Then the vitamins, the etc. cannot be easily calculated by this method, and there are having the limitations also. Then these are all the references. Even can. Then thank you very much for the patient hearing for such a long time. Thanks a lot. So today we will stop the class here, and tomorrow with some other thing we can come back. And thanks a lot for patient hearing, and